that we can overcome
Yes.
the strategy of Satan, our enemy.
Yeah, Paul said we are not unaware of his strategy or his scheme. Not that he's on our focus, but we need to be aware of it to overcome. God called us to overcome. And we have an enemy, we've talked about this, but we are to overcome. So one of the revelations in the Bible is that God reveals the enemy through the picture, the image of the serpent. He's called the serpent. In the Garden of Eden, the snake, the serpent. In Hebrew, the word for serpent is nahash. And it sounds like a hissing snake, nahash, like a cobra. Like that. That's what it sounds. A lot of the words in Hebrew sound like what they are. Like, for instance, the word for spirit or wind is ruach. It's like the blowing of the spirit, blowing of the wind, ruach, so as it goes. So you have this nahash, but it actually means the whisperer, like someone who whispers things and whispers things and plots. Actually, occult things are linked to that word too. So the thing is that this actually gives us a revelation. If you look at an actual snake and what they do, it actually gives you a revelation of how the enemy works in our life. That's why I call it Snake Busters, because it's linked to that. I'll give you just a few things. One is, snakes have no real ears. They can sense things, they can sense vibrations, but they don't go by hearing. They go by infrared and all these other things. First of all, the enemy, in other words, one of the things that it says faith comes by hearing. One of the things that he has no faith. One of the things that overcomes the enemy is living not by sight, but living by faith. Living by faith does it, because if you live by sight, the enemy is into appearances. His whole thing is appearances. He appears like an angel of light. So he'll always throw things in your life to make it appear like it's the worst thing. It will make you panic. Everything's going crazy, and he wants you depressed. He wants you angry. He wants you to mess up. Don't ever go by appearances. Always go by faith. That's one of the first things of overcoming the enemy. It says that, take up the shield of what? Faith. That's the overcoming thing. Another thing is that snakes use camouflage. They have stripes. They have all these things that blend in. And something that the enemy always does is he will always come camouflage. He will not come and say, I'm the enemy, and I want to destroy your life, and I want to destroy this. He'll always come camouflage as the thing you don't expect. If you're a Christian, he'll come camouflage as a Christian. Or if you're looking for spiritual things, he'll come camouflage as a spiritual thing. But it'll just be turned off a little bit. But he'll always camouflage himself, so that's another reason you can never go by your appearance. By appearances, you always have to go beyond the appearance. But another thing here is that the Bible says, in one of the scriptures says that he who breaks a hedge will be bitten by a serpent. He who breaks a hedge will be bitten by a serpent. And those serpents hung out in hedges. You break it. Well, what is it saying is one of the key protections from snakes and the key protection from the enemy is to have strong hedges in your life. In other words, there are certain things I will never do, certain places I will never go, certain situations I will get myself right out of, because the enemy will always use a broken hedge. It's when you say, okay, hey, this is okay, it's okay, this woman is not, this man, that's when he's going to bite. So always guard your hedges. That's true for dealing with snakes. It's true for dealing with the enemy. Another thing is that, if you look at a kind of a manual about how to avoid snake bites, it'll say stay on the path, don't go off to the right or the left. Snakes are always going to be on the side or where it's messed up or high grass. So one of the things is that it's very simple. Do not depart. It's when you go to the right or the left, that's when the snake is waiting for you there. But another one that very key is this preempting. There's a bunch of snakes. Well, what they do is, and you've probably seen this on National Geographic, is that they will swallow eggs whole. They put their thing around the egg, swallow the egg, they go after eggs. They do that a lot. The enemy, what does that mean? The enemy is the serpent. He will go after the purposes of God when it's still an egg, before it has come to pass. Yeah. He will attack you for what is the future. And it's so key. For instance, look, he's a preemptor. The thing that he tries to do is, if he can stop God's purposes before they come about, he's won. I mean, look what we talked about today, in the last few programs. He is there on the Temple Mount because of what's coming on the Temple Mount. What did he do with Moses when he was a baby, wanted to destroy the babies of Israel? Jesus, when he's a baby, Herod is possessed by the enemies moving. He tries to destroy him as a baby. If he can do that, he's done it all. When did he try to go against Messiah the most? Just before the ministry began. When he was in the wilderness, the ministry is going to be it. He preempts. So he's not just attacking you for what is. He's attacking you for what God is intending to do.
Yes.
So look at history. When did he go crazy to destroy the Jewish people? The Holocaust, Hitler, just before Israel is going to be birthed and all the prophecies are going to come true. Yeah. He tries to wipe them out before it happens. That's always how he works. The enemy is a preemptor. Yes. I can tell you, when I first came here, remember I came here and the whole building was flooded where I was. Right. As soon as the Harbinger was about to come out, the Hurricane Irene came to our building, flooded us all out. The enemy comes in like a flood. Everything was wiped out, And yet it didn't. I said, guys, I'm telling the congregation, hey, this is not hard to say this when everything we're wiped out. I said, this is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing because God is doing this thing. This means what's going to happen with the Harbinger, whatever, is going to be bigger than anything we imagine. So take it as an encouragement when that happens. I remember when I first started sharing about the Harbinger in the old building, right after I did, all hell went crazy against our ministry to the point where the town and the landlord said, we're going to destroy your building. And so this is the old building there. So they said, we're destroying it. So we had no place to go up until the last day. We had no place to go. The building ultimately was destroyed. And yet God gave us a bigger place. But not only that, but the building where they destroyed the place where I first started sharing the Harbinger, it's like the enemy, see, I didn't know what God was going to do with the Harbinger, but the enemy did. The enemy, and so he's attacking. And so now it was like it was going to end the ministry, right, where it was going to destroy the ministry, but it didn't. But they put up a Walmart over our building. The Walmart is selling books, and Walmart is selling the Harbinger. Yeah. So on the very place where I first shared it. So the enemy, he's smart. He's enough to know that, but there's also a stupidity too, because what happens is God always uses it to further it if you keep going. So remember that the enemy, snakes are preemptors. The enemy is a preemptor. So if you see him attacking something in your life, you're in God's will and he's attacking and it's going strong, that's a sign for you to say, number one, there's an encouragement here. There's something good. Do not stop because there's something good coming if I'm in God's will. Secondly, the very thing he's attacking is the very thing God's going to use in your life powerfully. Right. So take it as an encouragement. Take it as an encouragement. Look at how he tried to wipe out the first Christians. Yeah. Why? Because he knew he's a preemptor. So this is a real encouragement with the enemy. So if you see it, you can turn it around and see that this is for God's purposes. Another thing about dealing with the enemy is that, if you deal with a snake, you don't go for the tail. I mean, if you see a snake coming that's poisonous, you got to go for the head. Yeah. You got to go for the head there. And so it is because if you don't, you grab the tail, it goes around and bites you, But if you grab the head, people who deal with rattlesnake, they deal with that head right away. Well, what it's saying is also when you deal with sin, don't deal with the tail, deal with the head. Let me tell you what I mean. You don't want to deal with sin once it's already come in. You want the moment the head of sin, the moment it comes, that's the most effective way of dealing with sin. The moment its head comes up, the moment the thought comes in, deal then, and you'll be 100 times more powerful in the Lord than if you give it room and then try to deal later. But deal with the head. Stop it immediately. It says in the epistles, we fight against rulers. Now, the word in Greek is arche. It means we fight against not just little things, we fight against the rulers in spirituality. But arche also means the beginning. But deal with sin. Key secret of dealing with sin, deal with it the beginning, the moment it comes up when it's a seed. You won't deal with it when it's fully grown. Yeah. Deal with it and you will overcome the enemy. So deal with it. Another thing, and one thing to say here is that snakes are cold-blooded. They're cold-blooded. Now what I mean is, I don't mean they're mean, and I don't mean that they're cruel, but cold-blooded, meaning they're literally cold-blooded. Yeah. What that means is, they can strike fast, but they can't strike long. In other words, they can run, but they can't keep it up. And so in other words, if you have endurance, it can't happen. The enemy is cold-blooded. Sin is cold-blooded. Yeah. Evil is cold-blooded. Temptation is cold-blooded. Meaning, it will come fast. It'll come to overwhelm you, but it can never keep going. Yeah. All evil in the end fails. All evil dies. And that's why the key is, keep going. When you're being attacked and the temptation is give up, don't ever give in to that giving up. Keep going. Persevere. Don't live in the short term. The short term, that's where the enemy goes crazy. Forget it. Don't live in it. Look to the long term. Always, no matter what's happening, look. For instance, when he tempts you, don't look at the short term. Look beyond it. Look to the end, how the pain it's going to be. When it's hard to follow the Lord, the enemy is discouraging you, look to the long term. I'm going to be so blessed at the end of this. Always live to the long term and then walk to the long term. Don't ever stop. That's why it says, who overcomes the enemy? Those who persevere. You can fall down 1,000,000 times, but if you get up and keep going, you're going to overcome the enemy. The enemy can never outlast it. It will always fail. Good is for the long term. Evil is not. Evil is a dash, is a short-term dash. But good is the long-term running. You will never be overcome by the enemy if you keep going. Don't give up. So it says there is a word for the saints. Revelation. Do not give up. Persevere. Keep going, and you will cross that finish line.
Amen.